From Forte dei Marmi, Italy. Sea cycle. A man rides his bicycle on the sea. Salt rubs the tires. Sun reflects on the soles of his shoes as he pedals over starfish and speckled crabs, under seagulls and threaded clouds, past fishermen and upright bathers, until the pier, where he turns left and follows the sun down over the horizon. Welcome to the latest floating poetry broadcast, and thank you for leaning in your night or your day, from someplace in the world, ideally a place where you can pause and quietly listen. I'm glad you're here for show 159, coming to you live from the sea-dreaming coast of Rhode Island, the ocean state I call home. This is your poet and poetorialist Colin Goedecke, a voice for living our days more fully, more alively, more poetically. Last week's theme was there's more for you to discover, for each of us to discover other beautiful things to be found inside people we know, inside ourselves, in nature, in facets and moments of our daily lives and the fabric and flow of the world around us. Things we didn't know, hadn't gleaned before, have yet to experience, especially when we come to it all in a true and truly active spirit of discovery, fired up curiosity. This week I thought we'd have something on the lighter and lyrical side. Musings on mermaids, those beautiful mythical beings, those intriguing symbols across ancient to present time and cultures. Yes, on mermaids and on reveries of the sea, daydreams and free-floating feelings by and about the sea, its mysteries, its deep spirit, its salty calls and flowing songs. So I've arranged a tidal pool, we could say, of cultural commentary, poetry, and inquiry to ease back with for a while here and enjoy together. The beach is strewn with shells. The beach is strewn with shells, holding the music of blue-white swells. I actually like to be broadcasting to you by closer to the ocean, or right on the ocean, but we can imagine it. And we can imagine it through all the sharings tonight, mine and others. From the Cyclades in the Aegean, August 2012, from Kaliskea, the island of Kea, the road to Kaliskea. The ochre earth road spools down, sails out, plunges into sapphire, into the swaying sea. Marble-strewn coves shelter solitary boats, sun-blown branches, slow-swimming bodies. A lyre wind plays gently, lyrically, over the waters, over the wonders. From Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream, spoken by Oberon. My gentle Puck, come hither. Thou rememberest since once I sat upon a promontory, and heard a mermaid on a dolphin's back uttering such dulcet and harmonious breath that the rude sea grew civil at her song, and certain stars shot madly from their spheres to hear the sea maid's music. Thank you, Shakespeare. A poem of mine from Portsmouth, New Hampshire, summer of 2017, Mermaids. Only the first day, sailing footloose through the light-washed old seaport lathered with summer, and within hours meeting 3 mermaids, One idling, bare-breasted, bronze-skinned, spied through a passing window. Another floating bluely by the roadside between Wentworth and Wallace Sands. The third, with kiss-me-Kate eyes, offering up fresh oysters and lobsters from the lively, salty sea. Mermaids. I remember that day. I remember seeing that mermaid through the window, and she's the frontispiece for the show, tonight's show there. And the other was on a billboard between those two beaches that day, traveling to the beach. And the third was at a restaurant, having some wonderful fresh seafood there in Portsmouth. So you see where your mind and imagination can go. Well, I was curious what Wikipedia might tell us about mermaids. Quite a lot. There was so much material. There must have been 18, 20 pages of it. So we're not going through all of that, but there were some snippets of things, salty snippets to share with you, that they appear in the folklore of many cultures, including Europe, Asia, and Africa. The male equivalent is the merman. The male and the female collectively are sometimes referred to as merfolk or mer people. I wonder what it would be politically correct to call them today if they were swimming into our view. Mermaids have been a popular subject of art and literature in recent centuries, depicted in operas, paintings, books, comics, animation, and live action films. According to a Cornwall legend, a mermaid came to the Cornish village of Zenor, where she used to listen to the singing of a chorister, Matthew Truhella. The two fell in love, and Matthew went with the mermaid to her home at Pendor Cove. On summer nights, the lovers can be heard singing together. The legend, recorded by folklorist William Bottrell, stems from a 15th century mermaid carving on a wooden bench at the church of St. Sanara in Zenor. Well, maybe we should go there. Or if you're from Cornwall, you probably have been there or know all about it. It was new to me. Chinese folklore. A merfolk race called the Di people, described as populating its own nation in the Shanhaijing classic compilation of Chinese geography and mythology from the 4th century. There's also an account of the Hairenyu, sea human fish is the literal translation. Its female of its kind had a head like a beautiful woman's, with hair like a horse's tail, and white skin like jade without scales, covered with multicolored downy hair and legless. The male and female had sexual organs like humans, so that widows and widowers would keep them in their ponds, and the creatures could perform sexual intercourse normally as a human would. Well, it's fascinating. The Japanese equivalent is ningyo, literally human fish. They were oftentimes referred to as half woman and half fish, fabulous creature. Maybe look up some images. There weren't images with all these, but I'd like to see some. In Zimbabwe, mermaids are known as enjuzu and are believed to be solitary and occupy one body of water. Individual enjuzu may be benevolent or malicious. Sightings. How about that? I thought we'd dip in there. 2 sightings were reported in Canada near Vancouver and Victoria, one from sometime between 1870 and 1890 and the other from 1967. A Pennsylvania fisherman reported 5 sightings of a mermaid in the Susquehanna River near Marietta in June 1881. In February 2012, work on 2 reservoirs near Gokwe and Mutare in Zimbabwe stopped when workers refused to continue, stating that mermaids had hounded them away from the sites. I love those stories. You wonder about what they saw. Mermaid shows. Scantily clad women placed in water tanks and impersonating mermaids performed at the 1939 New York World's Fair, part of the Dream of Venus installation by surrealist artist Salvador Dali. The ama are Japanese skin divers, predominantly women who traditionally dive for shellfish and seaweed, wearing only a loincloth and who have been in action for at least 2,000 years. Starting in the 20th century, they've been increasingly regarded as a tourist attraction, operate off reefs near the shore, some perform for sightseers, and have been romanticized as mermaids. Well, there you have some lore. And I have questions for us about mermaids, mermen, merfolk, and reveries about the sea, which we're going to come more to shortly. When have you thought about mermaids or mermen? And what have you thought about them? What visual or emotional or imaginal associations arise when you hear or think about them? Like right now. Do you remember wondering about them as a child? If you could be a mermaid or merman, merperson, for a day, what might that be like? What would you like to do as such a being? To swim with the other beings of the sea, like the dolphins? Or ride side saddle astride a whale? Breathe underwater? And what about real yet timelessly and transportingly symbolic creatures like seahorses? They've always enchanted me. Seahorses. I even named my car, my chariot, 20-year-old Mercedes, the Seahorse, that I'd so happily ride along the coast here and elsewhere in. Sad to say, it's at the end of its life, past repair. Just got that news. So no more Seahorse. I have to say a fond farewell to her as we speak and invite the good fortune of another beauty, maybe a second Seahorse. And so we shall see, my friends, what unfolds, what the car gods have up their sleeves for your poet here. But back to a few more questions. One is wanting to know of your longings, spoken or unspoken, about the sea. What are they? How deep are they? How long have you had them? What do they feel like in your heart, in your body? What wonderful reveries have you had about the sea or by the sea, sweet or sad or bittersweet? Any kind that have come to you, filled you of late or somewhere back in time. How does the sea, the ocean speak to your spirit in any way? What does it stir in your body or your heart? Stay open to these arisings, these murmurings, these floating thoughts and feelings. They matter. William Butler Yeats wrote this poem, The Mermaid. A mermaid found a swimming lad, picked him up, picked him for her own, pressed her body to his body, laughed, and plunging down, forgot in cruel happiness that even lovers drown. Thank you, Yeats. Liesl Müller, the mermaid. All day he had felt her stirring under the boat, and several times when the net had tightened, frog-nervous, he had bungled the pulling in, half glad of the stupid open mouths he could throw back. At sundown, the shifting and holding of time and air had brought her to the still surface. The sun herself in the last slow light where lilies and leeches tangled and rocked. He could have taken her then, aimed his net as dragonfly hunters do when the glassy gliding of rainbows goes to their heads, could have carried her home on tiptoe and lifted her lightly, ever so lightly, over his sill. And, hopeless, knew that to have her alive was only this, the sounding, casting, waiting, seeing and praying the light not to move, not yet to round the bay of her shoulder, and passing, release her to the darkness he would not enter. Thank you, Liesl Müller. Ellen Upward, the mermaid. The sailor boy who leant over the side of the junk of many pearls and combed the green tresses of the sea with his ivory fingers, believing that he had heard the voice of a mermaid, cast his body down between the waves. Thank you, Ellen Upward. Langston Hughes, Catch. A big boy came, carrying a mermaid on his shoulders, and the mermaid had her tail curved beneath his arm. Being a fisher boy, he'd found a fish to carry, half fish, half girl, to marry. Thank you, Langston Hughes. And here's one of mine from Quanticontog Beach, Weekapaug, Rhode Island, where I walk and beachcomb often. This was August of 2020. And that's for 3 fishketeers that I know, among others, Ken, Doug, and John. It's called Catching Mermaids. What was the strangest thing you ever caught? I asked. Years ago, an eel pout, one of you said, and a kingfish. A Jack Crevalle, said another. I bet you never caught a mermaid, I said, and if you did, you wouldn't throw her back. Well, said the third fishketeer, stroking his chin, not right away. I love that moment, that scene. That's exactly how the conversation went. So I was faithful in giving it to you that way. It was all just so poetic. It's like found poetry. Can be a conversation like that. And of course I was being somewhat impish, as I can be. Shel Silverstein, you might know him as an American poet, cartoonist, and writer of children's books, including the delightful one, Where the Sidewalk Ends. Mermaid. Hey, when I was a lad in Fishing Town, an old man said to me, you can spend your life, your jolly life, just sailing on the sea. Now you can search the world for pretty girls till your eyes are weak and dim, but don't go swimming with the mermaid, son, if you don't know how to swim. If you don't know how to swim, for her hair is green as seaweed and her skin is blue and pale. And I tell you now, before you start, you can love that girl with all your heart, but you're just going to love the upper part. You're not going to like the tail. Thank you, Shel Silverstein. I had not come across that before. It was amusing. Martin Dyer, the Donnellys. Someone in an accent of seduction whispered salmon. Then someone filled a bucket up with sleep. Mermaidism in the Donnelly house was 5 sisters deep. Like that. Thank you, Martin Dyer. Matea Harvey has an interesting prose poem, anatomically and emotionally, The Inside Out Mermaid. Just a moment. I should be drinking salt water, but I think this is better with some squeeze of lemon. Well, the Inside Out Mermaid. The Inside Out Mermaid is fine with letting it all hang out. Veins, muscles, and bits of fat at her belly, her small gray spleen. At first her lover loves it. With her organs on the outside, she's the ultimate open book. He can pump her lungs like 2 bellows and make her gasp, ask her difficult questions, and study the synapses firing in her brain as she answers to see if she's lying. Poke a pleasure center in the frontal lobe and watch her squirm. No need for bouquets or sad stories about his childhood. He just plucks a pulmonary vein and watches the left ventricle flounder. But before long, she starts to sense that her lover, like all the others before him, is getting restless. This is when she starts showing them her collections. The basket of keys from all over the world, the box of zippers with teeth of every imaginable size, all chosen to convey a sense of openness. As a last resort, she'll even read out loud the entries from her diary about him, to him. But eventually he'll become convinced she's hiding things from him, and she is. Her perfect skin, her long black hair, her red mouth, never chapped from exposure to sun or wind. How she secretly loves that he can't touch her here or here. The Inside Out Mermaid. Thank you, Matea Harvey. Do you know the composer back in time, Stephen Foster, who wrote Beautiful Dreamer, Serenade? Beautiful dreamer, wake unto me, starlight and dewdrops are waiting for thee, sounds of the rude world heard in the day, lulled by the moonlight have all passed away. But in the third stanza, before the last, is Beautiful dreamer, out on the sea, mermaids are chanting the wild Lorelei. Over the streamlet, vapors are born, waiting to fade at the bright coming morn. Isn't that lovely? Yes, the mermaid swims in there. Well, speaking of a Lorelei is the German legend, as you may know, of the beautiful maiden who threw herself into the Rhine River in despair over a faithless lover, was transformed into a siren who lured fishermen to destruction. It's named after the rock on the bank of the Rhine River near St. Gorhausen in Germany, and it's known for producing an echo. And it became the subject of a number of literary works and songs, says the Encyclopedia Britannica, and the poem Die Lorelei by Heinrich Heine in 1824. And it's set to music by more than 25 composers. Interesting how alluring the mermaids and the sirens are. So many, from ancient times till now. Still. From Punta Bete in the Yucatan in Mexico, 1998, Margarita. The salty bite of your lip is a surprise, like kissing a mermaid, then the taste of your tart sweet body on the tongue in a rush of lightness, then swallowing you, then wanting more. Margarita. And they made some wicked good margaritas there in Punta Bete, let me tell you. How about this from June of 2016? Poets travel everywhere. Poets get to travel everywhere in time and space, even outer space, at the drop of a pen or a keystroke. Here you'll find one with a glass of rosé reclining on a cloud bank over a sun-setting valley. There, one communing with Greek gods on the steps of their temples. Another dancing with an undulating mermaid on a sandy sea floor. Or over stepping stones of stars, out in the wide, wondrous stream of the Milky Way. It's true. We poets, we can travel everywhere just like that. And we do. Here's a poem from a whole poetorial of mine called Ultramarine, written, spoken, and visual poetry for Bermuda and the America's Cup 2017 in Bermuda. I've seen a country that floats on the sea. I've seen a country that floats on the sea. It's royal blue at night, pale pink by day. I've seen a country that floats on the sea, where mermaids swim and sailors dream. T.S. Eliot, classic poem. Shall I part my hair? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk along the beach. I have not heard the mermaids singing each to each. I do not think they sing to me. I've seen them riding seaweed on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in chambers of the sea by sea-girls wreathed with seaweed of red and brown till human voices wake us and we drown. Thank you, T.S. Eliot. And from atlasobscura.com. Out at sea, the number of mermaid sightings exploded as the age of discovery kicked off as men in big, expensive boats made their way around the world. John Smith of Pocahontas fame caught sight of one off Newfoundland in 1614, noting that, quote, her long green hair imparted to her an original character that was by no means unattractive. Well, as science and reason solidified their hold in European and American society, the mermaid slipped further out of natural history and deeper into sailor lore. Well, that said, how about mermaid schools? Who knew? A friend I was just talking about the show coming up said, you have to mention mermaid schools. I said, I didn't even know they existed just today. So I found a many things about mermaid schools all over the world. But this one, just as an example, from Mermaid Cat, K-A-T, Academy.com. Welcome to our world of international underwater retreats. Here you have the chance to become a mermaid or merman or to continue your adventure. Underwater models and performers of all experience levels are invited to join us for our unique and unforgettable underwater adventures. International adventures specifically designed for merfolk. These experiences were created with love and passion and developed to meet merpeople's needs and dreams. Creating more ocean awareness is another important mission at our mermaid retreats. From first-timers to experienced pros and seasoned mermaids, this trip will not disappoint. Well, there you have it. You may want to sign up. I'm fascinated. And there are pictures of them swimming with the whole, as if they're mermaids, with the tails and everything, in deep underwater. Fascinating. Yes, I knew about all that. All right, let's undulate into some sea reveries. With one more mermaid appearing, I think. Thomas Merton. Song. The bottom of the sea has come and builded in my noiseless room the fishes and the mermaid's home. Whose it is most hell to be out of the heavy-hanging sea and in the thin changeable air, or unroom sleep some others wear, but play their choral violins where waters most lock music in. The bottom of my room, the sea, full of voiceless curtain deep, there mermaid somnambules come sleep where fluted half-lights show the way. And there lost orchestras play, and down the many quarter lights come to the dim mirth of my aquadrome, the bottom of my sea, the room. Thank you, Thomas Merton. In the boundless dream of oceans. Here in the boundless dream of oceans, deepness overcomes you. Darkness swallows sun, breath escapes, and time sinks to the bottom. I went and found that again after I read Merton's poem. I knew that was somewhere. Brian Wicker, a seashell from the Seychelles. Sally by the seashore, letting the sea drift sift through her half-closed fist, holds not only an ear-shaped shell of abalone and relics of timber felled from an age-old harvest of wreckage to rest again in a skeletal forest, but all the sea once held, pearled eyes and coralled bone and the Nautilus's whorled orifice, risen from its ocean spell to sit like a long-abandoned oracle, but listen to sing from the still small throne of its body. My lady, so little abides now in the sound of those tides. Daily I've waited for your presence, for evidence, and found the more the sea changes, remains into its own gains, the more I can explain your silence. Let what's precious be lost to most. At best, you are barely fathomed in the shared depths of a certain world. With hesitant steps, I've waded into the sea's midst, hoping to see merely your ghost, and what I've seen, turned shoreward and to calm, seems more than your boast. You've opened your palm. Thank you, Brian Wicker. A seashell from the Seychelles. Well, what pairs naturally with mermaids, to me, seahorses. In a gentle bow to them, I went to Underwater 360, Diver's Digest, from 2016. Until you see one for yourself, it's easy to believe that seahorses are pure make-believe. So curious, so magical, they seem to have wandered straight out of a book of fairy tales. Even a dead, dried seahorse, and by the way, I actually have one on my writing table I found recently. They seem to have wandered straight out of a book of fairy tales. Even a dead, dried seahorse washed up on a beach keeps its otherworldly shape, encased in its enduring, bony armor, waiting for someone to come along, pick it up, and wonder what it might be. A miniature dragon, an enchanted serpent. It's no wonder seahorses have been puzzling people around the world for centuries, inspiring them to tell stories, pass on myths and legends, and find mystical uses for these most charming sea creatures. Some of the oldest stories tell of the Greek sea god Poseidon galloping through the oceans on a golden chariot pulled by Hippocampus, the beast that was half horse and half fish. That's today's scientific name for the seahorse, the hippocampus, which I think is also the name for part of our brain, interestingly. Well, it's thought here, they say, that ancient Greek fishermen believed that real seahorses they sometimes found tangled in their nets were the offspring of Poseidon's mighty steeds. Isabel Gallimor's poem Seahorse. Isn't it shocking how he speaks for her? His thin voice wavering across the restaurant. She'll have the cod artichoke bake. A giggle of bubbles comes from behind them. A fish tank curtained with seagrass where a seahorse is tying itself to one of those slim, tweedy forms, like a hand shaping itself inside another's, the way my hand tucks into his, like a difference, pretending it's not. Thank you, Isabel Gallimore. Here's one of mine from Owl's Head, Maine, June 2021. Speaking of my chariot at the time, the seahorse. Maritime energy. I fill my car, my chariot, the seahorse, and the sails of myself with maritime energy, with main sea, wind, and marine air energy, with the sure purity of this place that invited but never expected flows fluidly into my body, into my consciousness, through every portal, every porthole, whenever I chance to appear, to open and receive here. Maritime energy. Let's get back there to Maine as soon as possible. From the Yucatan, 1999, the blue cellophane sea. Fathoms of fairy tale fish, great stretches of silence, sunken ships and treasures, wrapped in a blue cellophane sea. This is a poem inspired by John Marin's watercolor painting Sunspots that he did in Cape Split, Maine, 1920. I saw it at the Metropolitan Museum of Art back in 2011, and this poem came into me, or from me, as they do, or both. A sun-bobbled sea. Off the coarse point of another time, an unfaded ocean verges out in caps and crests of cobalt, indigo, turquoise, past one small bleach-sailed boat, toward a streaking sky where the sun becomes baubles of chrome yellow, rose madder, viridian, and cerulean, that float above the water-color surface, that float inside my water-colored eyes. Sun-bobbled sea. Thank you, John Marin, for the painting, and you can look it up, actually. Sunspots. John Marin, M-A-R-I-N. It's a beautiful painting. Here's one from Bridgehampton, July 1998. Spent many years out on the South Fork of Long Island. This was one of those summers I was there. Memory of a sea-shaped youth. The ocean dazzles the eye today, sparkling as far as the horizon. The water rushes the shore, regathers itself, waits, and rushes again, each time breathing out an essence of innocence, a bouquet of childhood days at the beach. And it still does, still brings that feeling, those memories, those reveries. Back to the Yucatan coast for a moment, Mexico. Debajo de mar en calma, under the calm sea. Underwater lies a luminous world where strands of light waver through the green glassiness, where your skin softens and glows, and all your limbs move slowly as in a dream. Below the surface, tender currents caress your body. Above, a warm breath plays on your neck and face as you sweep half-open eyes over the floating landscape. From the harbor at Gorizia, the island of Kea, the Aegean, August 2012. Stars have fallen. Stars have fallen tonight. silvered down around the harbor, spilled onto the soft surrounding hillsides, where they coolly and whitely constellate, where they create a son et lumière with the music of the wind and the waves, the gentle rustle of oak and grape leaves, until they dim and dissolve in the soon arriving light of day. Stars have fallen. Touchstone back to that moment for me, too. Another from Forte dei Marmi, where we began the show tonight on the Tuscan coast. The old god in his sailboat. He stands, half in sea, half in air, a Neptune making sport with a small red boat, using a large bronze hand to tend a course on the now glinting waves. He wonders, half wet, half dry, why his godlike motions have little effect, how the wind has a will of its own on this warm, silver afternoon in Tyrrhenia. The old god in his sailboat. And another very felt moment from Greece, from the Aegean, from the Cyclades, back in time for me. The satyr and the sea god. They disport themselves in a lucent blue disk of Aegean, ringed by mauve, rose, and ochre stone, pale ribbons of Rhode, rises of Oros, clouds of Timari, sage Thrumbi. The satyr suns himself recumbently, hedonistically, on a dry tongue of rock above the glinting surface, his body a study in earthly unrestraint, sensuous, voluptuous, whisperous, wayward. The sea god floats languidly, nakedly in the prisming shallows by the shore, his body a movement of bronze and marble, white loins bathed in salt water, honey-brown torso and brown limbs oiled under sea water. The satyr and the sea god. Let your imaginations and reveries carry you wherever they do, as that did. And now to our last sharings and musings, last handful. Derek Sheffield, What Will Keep Us? It's dedicated by him to Katie and Kelsey on the Save Our Coast hike. The coast is never saved. It's always being saved, said Peter Douglas. Every pack-heavied step over sandhoppers and weed-slicked rocks, through driftwood scatters and the chill of tide waters, over wooded headlands as wildfires blaze north, south, east. Every step says, stay. I know mermaids aren't real, Kelsey says, but Daddy, look, holding a whip of bull kelp, whose light bulb face is a brown-green eye under ribbons of translucent hair. We trudge our miles, stepping over oscillating anemones and sunlit pools to pause at Hole in the Wall and let their tentacles tongue our dipped fingers. And what's this holographic sheen? Not the oil we would keep from the shore, and not plastic. We see just a rainbow's iridescence beaming from a plant. Over teeth of barnacled rocks poking from pools of sand crabs and sculpin, through foamy maroons, emeralds, violets, tangles of surf grass and lettuce cushioning our steps. We hike, flies parting briefly for our ankles as we take in the gleaming curve of the otter's tail as she rises and dives into clear shallows, a pliable needle threading us and them, water, land, and rippled sky where the numberless legs of sandpipers twiddle their skittery flocks, always just ahead. For even the reek slap of rot from a carcass too far gone for ravens or gulls, we hike, for our own place among the eaters and the eaten, pricking at us as we see how wide the jawbone, how long and curved the fangs, for the piping stutter of a crow-mobbed eagle landing on a shaggy bough, for the lightest touches of day mist on our skin and our headlamps in the night, lighting the tracks of slugs, silvering up every spruce trunk's loom, We hike for what will keep us, if we keep it. On a bare stretch of sand ahead, a boulder splits into two bear cubs whose dark heads swivel our way before they turn as one toward the woods and lope out of sight, to go on in the multitudinous dream we need to be beyond our reach. Out past the breaking lines of waves, we can just glimpse through binoculars where the rounded humps of humpbacks slope one way and gray whales the other. 60-some otters floating on their back have knit themselves into a living net, weft, warp, leg, paw, kelp blades fixed by holdfasts to the deepest rocks. What is it they catch in their drift asleep amid mists and rolling webs of stars? Far enough where, if we fail, the drills will rise. And what now as they ride days swells in and out of sight in the rhythm of our own breathing? Our hike ends at the beginning of what the map calls wedding rocks, where people of the Maka long ago carved the round faces of sun and moon among fishers and fish, a whale, an orca. What feelings spilled through them as they knelt in these same unceasing sounds of waves, chip after chip falling away. We trace the grooves with our fingers, 5 centuries of wind laced with wet snorts and hunger cries of passing animals. Kelsey kneels over some new swirl of shell and exclaims. Katie says not a word, drawing with her stick something in the sand we can't yet see. Thank you, Derek Sheffield. What will keep us? It's from his collection, Not for Luck. From Egypt Beach on the South Fork of Long Island, years ago, early autumn oceanside. The sole silhouette of a man, silent, motionless, before a brilliantined expanse of running ocean, a low-flying gull, a slow-passing boat on the near horizon. Ribbons and threads of clouds tiered with pale blue, then deeper blue sky, laces of water music, caresses of cool sea wind, warm sand on the skin, serenity. My friends, however near or far you are from the ocean, from any ocean, stay salty, stay briny, you roving, full-sailing, free-versing mariner. Keep the sun on your shoulders, the bright blue sea at your feet, your face to the 4 winds, your chest swelling with sweet salt air, the cork of your heart all afloat, bobbing with ease, with saline joy. Stay salty. Yes, I am. I always will. It's my vow to myself. Next to last, also from Greece, from Carthea, the ancient Greek temple of Carthea, the ruins of the temple in the Cyclades. 2013. Music among the ruins. A solo flute floats upwind into our ears with the sound of waves smoothing over stones on the shore, with rushes of sea wind through the sun-baked, time-baked ruins, with the imagined voices of mythic gods and deep blue siren songs. Music among the ruins. And last, for now, till we're together again here, through the airwaves, earwaves, we might say. This is from the Yucatan Peninsula, 1999. Todo bien. All is well. Today, you take a siesta in the shade, surrounded by a sun-glazed sea. Your thoughts drift on the endless waves, on the passing clouds. Like shells, your ears catch the music of the surf, and the palms rustling like loose pages in the wind. You've forgotten the date, and indefinitely the hour. Todo bien. Thank you again, friends, for leaning in and floating in and dreaming in. Thank you also for sharing these shows with others. Post the show link or the whole playlist out to your friends as you like, or to your social media. so we can bring other good listeners into the fold. And as always, I invite your comments and questions and your donations, which do help support and sustain my work, creating and presenting these free weekly programs. If there's some theme you'd like me to create a broadcast about, send along an email, colin@thepoetorialist.com. And what about your experience of this show on Mermaids and Sea Reveries? I'd like to hear. If you are sending a contribution, you can do so by Venmo to Fivefold, Fivefold, at pipeline.com, or PayPal to the same email. Or just mail a check along to P.O. Box 1032, Westerly, Rhode Island, 02891, or donate through my site, thepoetorialist.com, by way of the Donate tab. I am open to being sponsored or hosted as a working poet in residence in the U.S. or elsewhere in the world to create a new flight of poetic art dedicated to a patron. Reach out to explore. Meanwhile, you can hear all the broadcasts online on YouTube on the Floating Poetry playlist. And you can, if interested, stay abreast of the oasis of regenesis for the wider world I'm leading and bringing forth this summer with some good collaborators. Just go to the poetisphere.com for an early taste of what's coming. The Poetisphere, the Poetisphere. I hope you'll lean in again for another broadcast, whether made next week or beyond. Until then, dear listeners, let things mythical and lyrical, like mermaids, color your imagination, delight your spirit, and reveries about the sea freely arise, serendipitously come to the surface, and beautifully infuse your thoughts, your feelings, and your oceanic longings. Goodbye for now, and good spirits.